Beatitudes. We're now up to the fourth Beatitude. We're going to begin with a reading from Isaiah chapter 55, verses 1 through 7. Let's listen to God's Word. Ho, everyone who thirsts. That's an odd translation, isn't it? Ho, what the heck does that mean, right? So I looked up the Hebrew word, and the Hebrew word means something like, listen up, you people, okay? So we'll start with that, okay? Listen up, you people. Everyone who's thirsty, come to the waters. And you that have no money, come, buy, and eat. Come, buy wine and milk without money and without price. Why do you spend your money for that which is not bread, and your labor for that which does not satisfy? Listen carefully to me, and eat what is good, and delight yourselves in rich food. Incline your ear and come to me. Listen, so that you may live. I will make with you an everlasting covenant, my steadfast love, my sure love for David. See, I made him a witness for the peoples, a leader and a commander for the peoples. Behold, you shall call nations that you do not know, and nations that you do not know, you shall run to you, because of the Lord your God, the Holy One of Israel, for he is glorified. Seek the Lord while he may be found. Call upon him while he is near. Let the wicked forsake their ways, and the unrighteous their thoughts. Let them return to the Lord, that he may have mercy upon them, and to our God, for he will abundantly pardon. And now from the Gospel of Matthew chapter 5, verse 6, Jesus is speaking. He says, blessed are those who hunger and who thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. We're going to begin with the word righteousness. We don't use that word very much in our culture anymore, do we? Some of us may be old enough to remember the musical group, the Righteous Brothers, with their soulful bass and soaring tenor melodies. During one of their concerts, when they nailed one of their signature harmonies and held it perfectly, someone in the audience said, "That's righteous, brothers," and the name stuck. Others of us may remember the famous line from Ferris Bueller's Day Off, where the school secretary is describing Ferris's popularity. She says that all of the students, the jocks, the motorheads, the geeks, and so forth, that they all adore Ferris. They think he's what? Do you remember? What? A righteous dude. That's right. I'm glad there's at least a couple other baby boomers here with me. They think he was a righteous dude. But if we were honest, righteousness has mostly taken on a negative connotation in our society. We obsess, and rightfully so, on condemning the self-righteous, don't we? Or at best, we use the word in a somewhat positive sense, where we talk about having righteous anger. But overall, like the meek in our last beatitude, we aren't very sure that we like righteous people. And we aren't very sure that we want to become a righteous person, in fact. But in the Bible, and in Matthew's Gospel in particular, righteousness is a very positive word with none of the negative connotations that we associate with it in our culture. A righteous person in the Gospel of Matthew is one who lives in a right relationship with God, first of all, and then a right relationship with their neighbor, secondly. They love their fellow humans despite the cost of doing so. In Matthew chapter 1, for instance, Jesus' father, Joseph, is described as a righteous man because he's willing to go beyond the Jewish legal requirement and protect Mary's reputation by quietly dismissing her. That's a righteous action in the New Testament. In much the same way, just 14 verses after this beatitude, Jesus says that unless his followers have a righteousness that exceeds that of the scribes and Pharisees, they will never enter into the kingdom of heaven. The rest of the Sermon on the Mount, then, can rightfully, no pun intended, rightfully be seen as a description of the kind of righteousness that Jesus is talking about. On the horizontal plane, we learn in the Sermon on the Mount, a righteous person reins in dangerous tendencies towards anger and lust and retaliation, and loves their neighbor even when the neighbor is considered an enemy. On the vertical plane, in terms of the person's relationship with God, righteousness is the way of hidden piety, a spirituality that doesn't seek out public applause for their giving, praying, or fasting, but rather is directed for God, who sees in secret and who rewards in secret. This righteousness is the way of trust, not of anxiety. It's the righteousness, it's the way of the golden rule instead of the rule of gold. It's the narrow gate instead of the wide pathway. And in the great judgment, according to the Sermon on the Mount, it is righteousness that will separate the sheep, the true followers of Jesus, from the goats, those that are only following Jesus for superficial or selfish reasons. This is a hard beatitude, isn't it? It has a different tone than the first three we've encountered. The first three beatitudes, blessed are the poor in spirit, blessed are those who mourn, blessed are the meek, right, are all based upon a person's inward status or being. And so they don't require as much of us. God is the active one in these first three Beatitudes, and we, on the whole, are basically passive recipients of God's grace, His blessings. And praise God for that. God is indeed gracious. But the tone shifts here in the third or the fourth Beatitude, doesn't it? All of a sudden, we have to do something in order to receive God's blessing. We have to hunger and thirst after Jesus' righteousness, the righteousness of the Sermon on the Mount. Hungering and thirsting. Let's face it, it's hard for you and I here in comfortable Johnston, Iowa, in the relatively comfortable 21st century to fully understand what Jesus is talking about here, because the truth is that most of us at least, have never truly been hungry or thirsty. To us, hunger means that we have to have our lunch at 1:30 instead of noon because we've been really busy at work. To us, thirsty means that we've been on a long trip and there hasn't been a quick trip around and we haven't been able to stop off and get a big gulp, right? But for Jesus' original audience, hunger and thirst were daily threats to life. Back then, and still today, by the way, for 795 million people on planet Earth, if you become hungry, if you become ill, rather, or you lose your job, your family could easily starve to death. There was no food stamp program. There was no WIC. There was no Salvation Army, no cross ministries. And thirst could quickly kill a person under the scorching sun of the Middle Eastern deserts. So you see, Jesus isn't just blessing the person who, has kind of a passing interest in righteousness. Or a person who says, righteousness, I think that's a good idea. Yeah, I like that idea. Let's be righteous instead of unrighteous. No, rather he is declaring blessed the person who longs for righteousness. Like a starving man who longs for a morsel of bread, or like a woman about to die of heat stroke longs for a drink of water. Presbyterian scholar Dale Bruner puts it this way. He says, it's not sufficient that we merely want righteousness. We must have a downright famine for it. For Jesus' followers, right relationships in the world are not luxury or a mere hope somehow, but rather are an absolute necessity if they are to live at all. Such people long for what is right. They crave justice, and they're willing to do whatever it takes to make it happen. Do we long for justice that way? Do we hunger or thirst for justice that way? There once was a man who came to a monk seeking enlightenment. The monk told the man to follow him, and he walked out into the middle of a river. Well, the man didn't really understand what the monk wanted, but he said, okay, this is part of the quest. So he walked out into the middle of the river with the monk. As soon as they got out into the middle of the river, the monk grabbed the man and forced him underwater and held him down there. The man, as you could understand, was completely caught off guard by this and quickly became disoriented. Just as he was about to pass out, the monk finally lifted the man up out of the water. The man, as you can again understand, was absolutely furious. What are you trying to do? Are you trying to kill me, he said? No, my son, replied the monk. I was trying to lead you to life. You said you wanted to seek enlightenment, so let me ask you a question. When you first came up out of the water, what did you want more than anything else? Are you crazy? The man said. I wanted air. Exactly, the monk said. And when you want God more than you want air at that very moment, you will be ready for enlightenment. Do we want God more than we want air? Is God's righteousness, seeing His rule of love and justice done on earth and in our persons, is that the highest priority in our lives? Is it St. Paul Presbyterian Church's highest priority? Or has some lesser god crept up into the altar of our lives? The god of comfort, or the god of pride, or the god of stability, perhaps? A lot of us know and perhaps have memorized Romans chapter 12, verse 1, where Paul says that we're to present our bodies as a living sacrifice to God, which is pleasing and right and acceptable to Him. But as someone once said, the problem with living sacrifices is that they often tend to crawl off of the altar, don't they? We like the comforts of religion and faith, but once God starts calling us to change our sinful selves, our life patterns, our social patterns even, then our sinful selves get back in and they begin to assert themselves. And the same sinfulness creeps in when we gather together in institutions, perhaps even more easily. Companies, governments, even churches can easily become self-serving. Lord have mercy. We want God, don't get me wrong, but we just don't want God to ask us to make hard sacrifices in our lives so that His will be done on earth as it is in heaven. So this fourth beatitude, this one is indeed a demanding beatitude, isn't it? It asks us to examine our hearts and to recommit ourselves to Christ and to seeing His will be done on earth, His mission. But it's also one of the most gracious and one of the most encouraging beatitudes. Listen again to Jesus' words. Blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they shall be filled. First off, note what Jesus does not say here. He does not say, blessed are those who have attained righteousness. Thanks be to God, right? But rather those who hunger and thirst for righteousness. God knows that we will never, ever be fully righteous. Even our best efforts are tainted with sin. And so it is those who long for righteousness and work towards and are invested in righteousness that are blessed. Second off, note that Jesus promises that the spiritually hungry will be, in fact, filled. They will be filled. Now, the Greek word for filled here means to be stuffed to the complete point of satisfaction. Finally, a food state most of us can relate to, right? Imagine the last time you had a truly wonderful meal. You ate until you couldn't eat anymore, and then you got leftovers and took those home and enjoyed them again later. When we were on vacation, for instance, Rebecca and I and Matthew, we went to a Korean barbecue. Oh my goodness, with an open pit fire kind of right in the middle of the table there. And they brought wave after wave of steak and calamari and shrimp and chicken and vegetables and all of these delicious little side dishes. Of course, kimchi. I know you all love kimchi. I do. And we ate and we ate and we ate because we could, you know, we could. And it was so good and it was just wonderful. Jesus is saying that is how our souls will feel if we will build our lives on right relationships with God and with others. Spiritually, we will feel full. We will be satisfied, stuffed to the brim even, with the truly meaningful, significant things in life. With friendships, with love and satisfaction that comes from pouring our lives into causes and missions that are truly meaningful. I think about our experience of Vacation Bible School that we just got done with here at St. Paul. I mean, so many of us gave it so much time and energy and effort. It felt like we just left it all out on the field. You know, they say that's where they just left it all out on the field. But it was an awesome experience. I pity those of you who weren't involved in Vacation Bible School. I really do. I truly do. Because we got to see and experience the joy of those kids coming to know and worshiping God. We experienced the satisfaction of working together for a worthy cause that was just amazing. That's God's righteousness also. That's the blessing of God's righteousness. So here's the question of the day. The question of the day is, how might God be calling you to grow in righteousness? How might God be calling you to work together with others in a truly meaningful cause in the world? Maybe it's helping to teach Sunday school next year, or our Puerto Rico mission trip, or taking the Disciple Bible Study as we talked about earlier, or helping out with the Cross backpack giveaway, or serving on a committee, or helping in our community food pantry garden. Or perhaps you just honestly don't yet know what it is. That's fair. That's fair. And we thought of you. We've thought of you, if you don't know, because on Sunday, September 8th, which is Rally Day here, the day that all of our kiddos come back to Sunday school, we are holding a volunteer fair after worship, where you can learn about these and many other opportunities to serve the Lord in mission and ministry here in and through St. Paul. Each committee or ministry area will have a little booth, or at least a table or a chair, I don't know what, describing who they are and what they do and ways that you can get involved. And a lot of them are going to be very simple, low commitment, but significant opportunities to help out here at St. Paul. It is going to be a really cool day. As you may be aware, we finished a second round of visioning here at St. Paul in the spring. And apparently, some folks have been asking when it is that the Visioning Task Force is going to get all of this work done. Yes, oh my dear friends, oh I wish it could work that way. I wish it did work that way. But that isn't how it's going to work. The task force's role is to compile the results of our visioning meeting. It's not to make the vision a reality. Making the vision a reality is the work for the entire body of Christ, for each and every person. Now, none of us can do it all, but all of us can do something, right? And so we hope that you'll hang around, plan on hanging around after Rally Day to learn more about possible ways that God might be calling each one of us, everybody, to serve God here. Isaiah, the prophet, writing to the exiles, invites everyone who hungers and who thirsts to come to the water. Listen carefully, he says, and eat what is good, and delight yourself in rich food. Come, buy wine and milk without money, without price. And that indeed is God's invitation to us today. To lay it all on the line for Christ. And watch as God fills us with more good things than we can imagine. Blessed, he says, Jesus says, blessed are those who hunger and thirst for righteousness, for they will be filled. Let's pray. Gracious God, this righteousness stuff is hard. Woo! And we're not so sure we want to make that commitment yet in our lives. Changing sounds scary. Sacrifice sounds scary. And so we need you, Lord, to give us faith, to woo us over to your cause, to help us to see the futility of the way we are in fact living our lives, and the possible glory, the satisfaction that could come if we lived our lives on a deeper level. A level where we are committed to you and where we are committed to our fellow human beings here on planet Earth. Convince us, Lord, that that is the pathway to life. Not hoarding our resources selfishly, but rather generously investing them in you, our relationship with you, with our time, talent, and treasure, and in our relationship with others. Help us, O God, to truly hunger and to thirst for righteousness. For we pray it in Jesus' holy name.